Despite months of hype and press, even The Flash was too slow to stop the bomb that is his first solo movie. There's a running gag in the DC universe about The Flash. Despite being the fastest man alive, he's always showing up late. This ironic character flaw presents itself in the opening sequence of The Flash, when he finds himself sneaking into work late after being waylaid by a sandwich, a collapsing hospital wing, and a baby in a microwave. The Flash itself is also running late. Originally planned for release in March 2018, the movie got trapped in the Phantom Zone, aka development hell, with a revolving door of writers and directors, and the cameras didn't start rolling until April 2021. In the time it's taken for the movie to come out, the DC Extended Universe has been rebranded as the DC Universe, and DC Films has been rebranded as DC Studios, with new co-CEOs James Gunn and Peter Safran crafting a fresh slate of movies focusing on gods and monsters. The Justice League that Ezra Miller's Barry Allen was once a part of is drifting away. The Flash marks Ben Affleck's last planned appearance as Batman, there are no plans for Wonder Woman 3, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will be the final leftover from the DCEU days. Perhaps that's why The Flash fell short of already low expectations at the box office in its opening weekend, grossing just $55 million in North America. The overseas totals are slightly higher, with Variety reporting a $75 million debut, but that's a pretty lackluster showing from a total of 78 international markets. Unlike the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has suffered a recent downturn after years of box office domination, the DCU has had plenty of ups and downs. When you look at opening weekend numbers, The Flash is pretty much in the middle of the pack, roughly on par with the opening weekend for the first Shazam movie. The stats are complicated, however, by the COVID-19 pandemic, which impacted the box office for most of the movies in the lower end of the chart. This makes it harder to look for a pattern. But it's safe to say that The Flash wasn't helped by releasing 6 years after the character's last big screen appearance, and in the wake of a soft reboot for the DC franchise being announced. Then there's the broader issue of superhero fatigue, the long-expected saturation point where audiences have simply grown tired of superhero movies. The box office disappointments of Black Adam, Shazam: Fury of the Gods, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania cemented superhero fatigue as a bona fide threat. However, the success of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, albeit still with a box office downturn from the previous entry, and the incredible box office numbers for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse indicate that the superhero genre is far from dead. It's just that generic, formulaic stories aren't going to cut it anymore. The Flash feels like it's from an outdated playbook. The dead parent origin story is tired. Bringing back actors who played earlier versions of superheroes? It's hard to top Spider-Man No Way Home on that front. And younger Batman fans grew up with Christian Bale, not Michael Keaton. The Flash also has a dreaded third-act skybeam, a trope that literally involves a giant laser beam that shoots into or from the sky to trigger the climactic battle. This lazy story device has long been a mainstay of superhero movies. And thanks to time travel shenanigans, it's the exact same skybeam we saw a decade ago in Man of Steel. It's impossible to talk about The Flash without addressing constant controversy surrounding star Ezra Miller. It's unlikely that a significant number of people boycotted The Flash over the allegations against Miller and their string of arrests. But the absence of a viable star can do just as much damage to a movie as an outright boycott. For years, Robert Downey Jr.'s charisma and star power helped drive the success of the MCU.
I am Iron Man.
Spider-Man: Homecoming used the bond between Downey's Iron Man and Tom Holland's Peter Parker as the launch pad for a successful new Spider-Man movie franchise. It's no mean feat, considering the character had just been rebooted for the second time in the space of a decade. It's probably no coincidence that the MCU's box office downturn began after Downey exited the franchise in Avengers: Endgame. Miller released an apology through Vanity Fair in August 2022, saying that they were suffering complex mental health issues and have begun ongoing treatment to get back to a healthy, safe, and productive stage in my life. However, they've been absent from press interviews in the lead up to the release of The Flash, only making their first public appearance at the Los Angeles premiere. Compare that to Dwayne Johnson, whose personal brand and commitment to promoting his movies undoubtedly saved Black Adam from being a far bigger disaster than it was. TV often gets completely ignored in box office discussions, but it shouldn't be. 2006's Superman Returns, failing to launch Brandon Routh's version of the Man of Steel, may well have had something to do with Smallville being one of the biggest shows on TV. The season 6 premiere drew almost 5 million viewers later that same year. For a long time, Warner Bros. Was concerned enough about TV shows diluting the appeal of its DC movies that certain characters were strictly off-limits for the CW's Arrowverse. When Joe Manganiello's version of Deathstroke joined the DCEU, Arrowverse showrunners were no longer allowed to feature Manu Bennett's version of the character. The Flash arrived in theaters less than a month after the CW's Flash series came to an end after 9 seasons. Hardcore fans of the character weren't exactly starving for Flash content in the decade leading up to his solo movie. Miller's Barry Allen even made a cameo appearance during the Arrowverse's Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover event.
Found Barry Allen.
No! What does that mean? How can this...
This should be impossible now.
And while ratings certainly dipped towards the end of the series, the Arrowverse's Flash garnered a fan base of millions around the world and mined the comics pretty thoroughly for storylines. It did the whole DC multiverse thing years before Miller's Flash met Keaton's Batman. Even if superhero fatigue isn't a thing, Flash fatigue might be. With a budget north of $200 million, The Flash is unlikely to break even during its theatrical run. Short of some surprisingly strong legs at the box office in the coming weeks, don't bet on hearing any news about The Flash 2. The DC Universe is setting out toward new horizons, and the Scarlet Speedster will likely get left behind.